Burns Bog is the largest undeveloped urban landmass here on the west side of North America. But even here, we can't escape the everyday plastics that surround us. I mean, look at me. I have my plastic sunglasses, I have my backpack with a bunch of plastic buckles on it, and even my reusable water bottle is made out of plastic. But luckily, here in BC, most of our plastic waste won't end up in places like this. They end up in places like this, the Vancouver landfill. Despite recycling efforts, most plastics end up in landfills. To understand more about plastic waste, we first really need to understand what plastics are. Now things are going to get a little complicated, so bear with me. Plastics are developed by the fossil fuel industry. First, crude oil is extracted and then refined to one of the 6 categories. That's LPG or propane, asphalt, diesel, gasoline, lubrication oil, and naphtha. Naphtha is what's used for all plastics. The naphtha gets further processed in what's called the cracking process, and eventually it turns into ethene and then polyethylene. With the help of stabilizers, the polyethylene is eventually cut up into tiny little pellets like this and shot into injection molding machines or other plastic machines. All plastics have different properties and principles and are used for different things. For example, number 1 stands for PET or polyethylene terephthalate, and is often used for things like pop bottles. It's strong, lightweight, clear, and doesn't leach any flavors into the pop. Now, in addition to the type of plastic, there's one more thing that we have to consider, and that's where the plastic is coming from. So say brand new plastic is made from the crude oil refinement process. It gets sent to factory A. Now this plastic is considered virgin material. It is brand new material, it's super clean, it's super easy to work with, and you can make pretty much anything you want fairly quickly. Now when factory A no longer needs this material, they're going to send it and sell it to another factory called factory B. And factory B is going to use this material to make their products. This material is called PIR, post-industrial recycled material. PIR is very similar to virgin. It's clean, it's all one plastic, it's easy to work with. And companies can actually say that their products are 100% recycled, even though it's pretty much the same thing as virgin. Now we have to remember that there are millions of plastic products produced every year, made for different purposes, made out of different types of plastics. We have plastic with residue or food residue like pop, yogurt, beverage containers. We have takeout containers, shampoo, things for massage, electronics, kids' toys, everything under the sun. So when we add that to the mix, things get a little more complicated. We can have all these companies make their materials out of virgin or PIR, and we can consume these products as consumers with different types of plastics. But when we recycle all of these at the end of the day, they all get mixed up together and they get sent to a sorting facility. At the sorting facility, they have to take about all these different types of plastics and break them apart because they can't be used unless they are the same type of plastic. Plastics may look the same to you and I, but on a molecular level, they're totally different. That's why we have the categories 1 through 7. Making a plastic product with a mixture of this is near impossible. It's kind of like if we tried to make this little watch here with a pile of scraps. I mean, technically this shoe has the leather for the strap and we got the metal and the glass to make a watch. It would be possible, but it would be a logistical nightmare. That is why so many companies opt for virgin material than PCR. It's simply easier to work with. Because as much as you can try to sort plastic, there's always going to be a little bit of contaminants. That's why it's a lot harder to make things out of post-consumer recycled material versus virgin or PIR. But PCR still can be used. That is why we recycle. The plastics get taken to a sorting facility where they are sorted by their category, reground up, and used again for plastic manufacturing. But not all plastics have such an easy life. Let's take yogurt, for example. So, say I have some yogurt and I eat it. So let's pretend we take these yogurts and make a bit of a family. So we have father yogurt, mother yogurt, brother yogurt, and sister yogurt. And they're all gonna end up in different places. Mrs. Yogurt gets eaten at the park, and she gets correctly placed into her recycling bin. However, people at the park have been careless and they put random garbage and food scraps into this recycling bin. This means that the entire bin is contaminated and gets thrown out like any other garbage, like any other trash. Father yogurt gets eaten on my way to work, and I put it in the correct recycling container. However, in this municipality, number 5 plastics don't get recycled, and it gets thrown out at the sorting facility. Brother Yogurt gets taken to the beach. Now, being the little rebel that he is, he simply gets littered, and he gets washed out into the ocean. Here, he spends about 200 years wreaking havoc on marine life. And Sister Yogurt gets eaten in my apartment. She gets properly washed and put in the correct blue box recycling container. Luckily, in her city, they do recycle number 5 plastics, so she gets ground up and sent to a plastic manufacturer. She gets properly recycled and gets to turn into a brand new product. In our example, 1 out of the 4 containers was recycled, so that's 25%. But in reality, it's as low as 8%. So why is it so low? Well, first we have to remember that plastic is everywhere. It's not just our plastic containers and water bottles. Plastic is used in electronics, in our furniture, in our clothes, our building supplies. It's everywhere. So recycling 100% of it would be extremely complicated. The second reason, perhaps a little more troubling, is that there's simply a lack of demand for recycled material. So manufacturers rather work with the easier, cheaper virgin material than the more complicated PCR. Another constraint is color. PCR products usually have to be black. Why? Because after the sorting process, there's going to be a lot of different colors in that batch. So when all the plastic is ground back down into little pellets, the only color that any brand can really make is a brown or a black. So unless a company wants to make everything they have out of black, they're going to have to use some virgin material. The last reason is logistics. Virgin materials are just so much easier to work with. They have a steady price and a steadier stream of materials. So it's a lot easier for a company to budget out the time and the money they need to make a product when they're using virgin materials. For many brands trying to compete with their products, they're trying to compete on things like the best price, the best colors, the best design, the best strength. And PCR doesn't really offer that many benefits. In many ways, using PCR makes their company uncompetitive. Well, right now, virgin material is just slightly cheaper than PCR. This means that there's little to no demand for PCR. It's kind of like anything. If you're on an airplane and you're offered first-class seats for cheaper than economy, you would always buy the first-class seats. The economy seats still have a value, they still have a purpose, but if they were slightly, just $1 more expensive, no one would buy them. One way to solve this problem is through an artificial increase of price for virgin materials. This could be done through a tax or government subsidy. At the point where the price of PCR decreases below virgin material, PCR would finally become desirable. It would finally become a resource that companies want to take advantage of. Better sorting facilities and better ways to use PCR would be had. Even though there's a growing drive towards sustainables, on a global level, there's still economic growth in crude oil refinement. Companies still want to find cheaper ways to use virgin material. However, more expensive virgin material could force companies and countries to adopt more recycling processing, further driving down the cost of PCR, and eventually creating a positive feedback loop where turning old products like this is so easy it becomes the norm. Now, I know when you say the word tax, everyone kind of loses their mind. No one likes a tax. But programs like this already work. For example, when you buy a bottle of soda, just like this one, you pay a 5-cent tax. That gives 5-cent value to the bottle. And guess what? The type of plastic that bottles use are the #1 recycled plastic in the world. That's PET. And it's recycled at about 30%. Other plastics like #5 plastic is recycled at about 1 to 2% rate. So it's about time that companies start paying a little extra for virgin material, just like we pay a little extra for soda bottles. And don't worry, if something like this was implemented, the price of your soda or shampoo might go up like 1/10 of a cent. It would barely be noticeable. Another solution may be to flat out ban single-use plastics. There are already so many other solutions out there that people can use. For example, grocery stores could replace plastic bags with paper ones, and we could use cardboard instead of styrofoam when it comes to packaging. Of course, single-use products aren't the only problem. Companies should make sure that their products that they produce, whether it's PCR or virgin material, last a long time. One of the environmental benefits of plastic, you could say, is that it does last a long time. It technically kind of lasts forever, but it only lasts as long as design allows it to. So companies producing quality products can help reduce the overall consumption of plastic. This also means that consumers need to vote with their dollar. Instead of having the mentality of, oh, I'll just recycle it if it breaks, or I can just buy another one because it's so cheap. Perhaps the mentality should be, what is the best quality product and what's going to last me the longest? Another solution that may help reduce plastic consumption is standardizing labeling. Similar to nutritional facts or graphics on tobacco, perhaps there should be a standardized label for plastic products. that simply say made with virgin or made with PCR. Right now, there's no real way for consumers to vote with their dollar. Perhaps making something more sustainably with recycled plastics is something that consumers would want to look out for. So that's all I have time for today. I hope you learned a little bit more about plastics from this video. If there's one thing you should take away from this video is that recycling is incredibly difficult. So out of the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, you should really have recycle at the bottom of the list. Try to reduce and reuse as much as you can. Take care.
I never know what I want. You always say that I'm always wrong.
You can't laugh.
Sorry. Okay, I'll look away then. I actually can't listen either.
This is impossible. I have to get through 4 buckets.